So triggers. Let's say you have a function that you want to run on some sort of event. That you want to, as soon as some event happens inside of your database, you want some sort of effect to happen afterwards. This might be one of the better reasons to use a function. Let's say we needed an audit trail of the names of our recipes. We wanted to see that this used to be called Bob's cake and now it's called Alice's cake and then it's called Eve's cake, right? And we wanted to have that kind of audit trail of names so that someone could go mouse over it and see what this used to be called. This would actually be a really prime case of where I would use a function, and you would not be able to do this outside of, well, you could do it outside of a trigger. You could query like the name of what it used to be, then you could write it, and then you could write it to a different table. This would actually be really easy to write as a trigger. I might lean towards doing that because having the database handle this makes some sense to me. So create a table called updated recipes with me. There's nothing interesting here except maybe timestamp. Timestamp is just, it's a timestamp. There's not really too much interesting there. If you want to see what a timestamp looks like, just say select now like this. You'll see that is what a timestamp looks like in Postgres. It's going to keep the ID of its own ID. It's going to keep the recipe ID. You could technically make this a foreign key. I'm not going to because I don't want to, but this in all likelihood should be a foreign key. I have contrived examples and I didn't want to have to deal with constraints. Old title, new title, time of update, and timestamp. Okay, copy and paste that. I think originally I did have this as a foreign key and my examples weren't working and I got sick of it, so I didn't want to do it. Anyway. So we're going to create another function here. Nothing here is really that interesting, other than it returns a trigger, because a trigger is a specific type of function, right? And then I did a little bit more programming stuff here. So if old title, and old is like a specific name of like what it used to be, right? Because it's a trigger, it's going to provide both of those as these like environmental variables. So if old title is not equal to new title, right? So if it changed over the course of this, then we're going to insert this into updated recipe with all of the stuff that we asked for here. All this function does. Let's go ahead and copy and paste that into our Postgres. So now I have my function here. You can see there I have the set ingredients to null. That is procedure. This one is a trigger, and this one returns character variant. So the key part of this trigger is it's not returning anything because I'm never going to call this trigger. Postgres is going to call this trigger, right? That's why it has to return a trigger function. And then down here, we've created the trigger, but nothing. The trigger is not tied to anything yet. So we have to tell it you're going to react to this event. So that's what this does. Create or replace trigger. You have to give it a name. So on an updated recipe trigger, that's what I called it. Anytime that the recipe table gets updated, I want this trigger to run. It's going to ask, is the old title different than the new title? If it's not, it does nothing. If it does get updated, then it's going to run, insert into this table, the updated recipes table. Okay? So that's what after update, you could say after delete. You could do after any of these other events that exist on recipes. If you update 10 rows, I want to run this function once for each row. That's what this for each row execute procedure, log updated recipe name. Okay. So now if I run that, I have created my trigger. So now if I update anything, it's going to put stuff in there. Select star from updated recipes. You can see I have nothing there. Did I have a query here that, oh no, I have to make one up. That's fun. Update, let's see, select star from recipes limit 5. Okay, so let's update cookies. So update recipes, set title equal to, oh my god, cookies? I don't know, I'm running out of creative juices at this point in the course. Where recipe ID equals 1. So if I do this again, so it's actually not doing that, where ID equals 1. Oh yeah, recipe ID, rather. Oh my god, cookies. So there we go. So now I should see something. Actually, I have that query in here. And now you can see I didn't insert this, the database did it, but this is the ID of the change. The recipe ID is 1, right? Because I updated cookies, that was the recipe ID here. The old title was cookies. The new title is oh my god, cookies. Hashtag art, creative Brian. And then the time of the update, that happened now, so that's the time that it inserted into the database. And now we can have this kind of audit trail of what the name of recipes has been over time. So why is this useful to do this way as opposed to doing it in code? Now if anything updates updated recipes, we will get an audit trail of that no matter what. Whether that's someone in PSQL doing it, whether that's my app is doing it, my functions, a different part of the app, a different service, anything, this trigger will always fire. So this would actually be a pretty compelling use case for a trigger and a function, even though it is putting some business logic into the database. Like you can imagine, let's say I had someone hack my database and get access to my production keys. As long as they didn't have write access to this, we would still get an audit trail of something happening as long as they were not able to drop that table, right? That's a big if. If you get hacked, you're probably screwed anyway, but it's a thing.
Can you explain where old and new came from again?
Sure.
Are those just like keywords?
Yeah.
In SQL?
So when this is a trigger, right? So as part of the trigger function and specifically an update trigger function, it provides to you old and new of like, this is what it was, this is what it's going to be. You can do stuff based on that. Like something I could totally do here is I could prevent unwanted changes, right? So I could put some sort of like code here that says like, hey, if this is changing in such a way, don't apply the change, keep the old one. There's a bunch of stuff you can do. I just showed you one that's like creating an audit trail, but yeah, we're scratching the surface here because one, I really don't want you to use these that much. And two, it's not something I have a ton of experience doing because I really try to limit what kind of work I put into this. You cannot run procedures as triggers. I think I had that mistake in my last lesson, but that you can only run functions as triggers. Triggers always deal with functions, but there is nothing preventing you from calling a procedure from a function. But I would be upset if you did, probably. Because at that point, just write the function that does it, don't call a procedure. The more indirection you add to this, the harder it gets.